Join me as I dive deep into the mystery of who really wrote the Bible and see if I can uncover the shocking truth about its authors. The Bible is one of the most influential books in human history, with billions of copies sold and distributed worldwide. It's been translated into thousands of languages, quoted in every sphere from politics to poetry, and debated across centuries of theology, philosophy, and cultural critique. But have you ever stopped to ask, who actually wrote it? This isn't just a question of history, it's a question of meaning. Because who wrote a text influences how we understand it. What if the Bible wasn't written by just a few chosen prophets or scribes? What if it wasn't dictated word for word by God, but instead compiled over centuries by dozens of authors across different lands, cultures, and political climates? That's what we're about to explore. Understanding the authorship of the Bible is crucial for interpreting its messages. If we believe a text was written by Moses during Israel's desert wanderings, we'll interpret it differently than if it was written by a priestly editor in exile centuries later. Different authors wrote in different styles, addressed different audiences, and had different theological goals. Modern biblical scholars use tools like historical criticism, archaeology, and linguistics to peel back the layers of this ancient text. They want to know, who were the people behind the stories? Were they kings, scribes, shepherds, warriors, poets, or theologians? Did they write from personal experience or pass on oral traditions shaped by generations before them? Meanwhile, religious traditions often present a more unified story that God, through divine inspiration, led chosen individuals to write the sacred words exactly as he intended. This view emphasizes consistency, authority, and divine control. But the tension between these two perspectives, faith-based tradition and scholarly inquiry, is where much of the mystery lies. Let's begin with the traditional attributions. The Old Testament, or Hebrew Bible, is traditionally said to have been written by Moses. The Torah, the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, is traditionally attributed to Moses, the leader who delivered the Israelites from Egypt and received the 10 Commandments. David, the second king of Israel, a warrior and musician, is believed to have written many of the Psalms, songs of praise, lament, and devotion. Solomon, David's son, is credited with Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs, wisdom literature full of poetry, philosophy, and love. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. These individuals are believed to have directly received messages from God and recorded them for the people of Israel. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These 4 men are believed to be the evangelists who recorded the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Paul, the Apostle Paul, formerly a persecutor of Christians, wrote many of the letters or epistles to early Christian churches. These writings form the theological backbone of the New Testament. Peter, James, John, Jude. Other apostles and early Christian leaders who authored additional letters. But what if these names aren't the whole story? The Torah. Was it really Moses? Scholars widely agree that the Torah was not written by one man, but rather compiled from multiple sources. The documentary hypothesis is one theory that suggests the Torah is composed of 4 main sources. J, the Yahweh source, uses the name Yahweh for God, contains vivid anthropomorphic language, and focuses on the southern kingdom of Judah. E, the Elohist source, uses Elohim for God, has a more elevated view of the divine, and is thought to have originated in the northern kingdom of Israel. D, the Deuteronomist, primarily responsible for the book of Deuteronomy, emphasizes law, covenant, and centralization of worship in Jerusalem. P, the priestly source, concerned with rituals, genealogy, and religious observance, likely composed during or after the Babylonian exile. These sources were woven together over time by redactors, editors who preserved and combined them into a single narrative. This theory helps explain contradictions and duplications in the text. For example, why are there two creation stories in Genesis? Or why does the flood narrative seem to repeat itself with slight differences? Although King David is traditionally credited with the Psalms, scholars suggest many Psalms were written by others, including temple musicians and anonymous poets. The Psalms span hundreds of years, reflecting different historical periods and theological concerns. Likewise, while Solomon is named in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, the content likely comes from various sages and was compiled long after Solomon's reign. Books like Isaiah were not written by a single prophet. Isaiah likely contains three major sections. First, Isaiah, chapters 1 through 39, from the historical prophet Isaiah of Jerusalem. Second, Isaiah, chapters 40 through 55, from an anonymous prophet during the Babylonian exile. Third, Isaiah, chapters 56 to 66, from post-exilic writings. This division reflects changing historical contexts and theological concerns. Although named for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels are anonymous. Their titles were added later based on early church tradition. Most scholars date the Gospels between 70 and 100 CE. Mark is believed to be the earliest, written around 70 CE. Matthew and Luke may have used Mark as a source, along with another lost document called Q. John is more theological and symbolic, and likely written last. These Gospels reflect not only the life of Jesus, but also the needs and concerns of the Christian communities they were written for. Each Gospel offers a distinct portrait of Jesus. Paul's letters, of the 13 letters attributed to Paul, only 7 are considered genuine by most scholars. The others, such as Ephesians and the pastoral epistles, Timothy and Titus, show differences in vocabulary, theology, and historical context. This doesn't mean they lack value, but it suggests that later Christians may have written in Paul's name to preserve or expand his teachings. Before anything was written down, biblical stories lived in oral tradition. These stories were passed down through generations by storytellers, priests, and elders. In oral cultures, memory was sacred, but oral transmission also allows for adaptation and evolution. Stories change depending on context, audience, and time. For example, the Exodus narrative, central to Jewish identity, likely evolved over centuries as communities reshaped the story to fit new historical realities, like the Babylonian exile. Similarly, Jesus' teachings circulated orally among his followers before being written decades later. This doesn't mean the stories are unreliable. Rather, it reflects how communities shape sacred memory to preserve meaning across time. The process of canonization, the selection of texts considered sacred, was long and complex. The Hebrew Bible, or Tanakh, was solidified around the 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE. Not all Jewish groups agreed on which books belonged. For example, the Sadducees accepted only the Torah, while the Pharisees accepted more. Greek-speaking Jews in Alexandria translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek around the 3rd century BCE. This version, the Septuagint, included additional books not found in the Hebrew canon, such as Tobit, Judith, and Maccabees. Early Christians used a variety of texts: Gospels, letters, apocalypses. Over time, church leaders recognized certain texts as authoritative. The canon we know today was largely finalized by the 4th century CE, though debates continued for centuries. Books like The Shepherd of Hermas and the Gospel of Thomas were widely read, but ultimately excluded. Inclusion often depended on apostolic origin, consistency with Christian teaching, and widespread use. No original manuscripts of biblical texts survive. All we have are copies, often copies of copies, made by scribes over centuries. These scribes worked by hand, sometimes introducing errors, changes, or intentional clarifications. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the 20th century, provided some of the oldest biblical texts we possess, dating back to around 200 BCE. These scrolls revealed that significant textual variations existed, especially in books like Isaiah. Manuscripts like Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus from the 4th century show how early Christian scribes preserved and shaped the New Testament. Textual criticism, the science of comparing manuscripts, helps scholars reconstruct what the original text likely said. It's an ongoing process, constantly refining our understanding. Here's the heart of the matter. If the Bible wasn't written by who we thought, can it still be sacred? The answer depends on how we define inspiration. Some believe inspiration means dictation. God told the authors exactly what to write. Others see it as a divine human partnership. God worked through human authors in their time and context to convey eternal truths. Even if written over centuries by dozens of authors, the Bible tells a remarkably unified story: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. Its voices harmonize and clash, but together they reveal something deeper than history, a theological and spiritual truth. So who really wrote the Bible? The answer is many people, across centuries, in different lands, speaking different languages, living different lives. Yet through them, a story emerged, a story that millions believe is the story of God and humanity. Whether you see the Bible as a divine manuscript or a historical tapestry, it remains a cornerstone of faith, culture, and moral inquiry. By understanding its authorship, we don't diminish its value, we deepen it. We move beyond surface readings into a rich, layered engagement with the text. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the Bible's mysterious origins. I hope it's left you with more insight and perhaps more questions. If you'd like to continue exploring the history, symbolism, and meaning of Scripture, subscribe, leave a comment, and check out our next video, Lost Books of the Bible, What They Didn't Want You to Read. Until next time, keep seeking truth.